So there has been so much buzz surrounding this show, but is it actually good? Swarm is an Amazon Prime show and stars Dominique Fishback as Dre. She's a young woman who is obsessed with the singer Nyjah and her descent into madness. So the show is very purposefully trying to make you think that it's based on a true story. And while it does borrow certain events that have actually occurred separately, it does lump them together into one character and expands from there. Nyjah is very clearly supposed to represent Beyonce, and Swarm is a reference to Beyonce's fans, the Beehive. A lot of famous things relating to Beyonce are included in the show, like the infamous elevator fight, the fact that her sister is also a singer, being married to a famous rapper, also other incidents such as someone biting Beyonce's face. I did not know that happened, but apparently it's a thing, and a man rushing on stage at one of her shows. So first, let's go through spoiler-free thoughts and info. So the show is only 7 episodes long, with each episode being around 40 minutes. It's a very easy binge watch. I watched it all in one day, no problem. I found it interesting that the aspect ratio for the show wasn't the current, 16:9 standard, but went for the older 4:3. It made the show feel very claustrophobic, which was most likely very intentional. In general, I feel like everything in the show was extremely intentional, which is good. You want the people working on the show to have intention, but when you feel it as a person watching the show, it can come off as to try hard, which is personally what I felt. For example, if we take another director who is extremely meticulous and intentional with everything that happens on the screen, the director Edgar Wright, he leaves his obsession usually in the background for the most part, kind of like you have to pay very close attention in order to see it. A good example would be how in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the numbers of the X's show up in all of their scenes, but you have to look for them, and it doesn't really, they're not like X number 4, X number 5, it's around, and if you pay attention to it, you will see it, but it's not right in front, in your face the entire time. Here, I felt like everything was made to look very artsy and edgy and disturbing, and it worked for a lot of the show, but it also felt too much in other parts. For example, I really liked the use of buzzing to indicate a sort of break in Dre's psyche. But then there's stuff like her junk food obsession. It was just kind of for shock value. A lot of stuff revolving food in general was a bit odd, and yet was very much in your face, like this has meaning, and it really didn't have much meaning. I feel like I missed something when I don't think I did. Speaking of Dre, or more precisely Dominique Fishback, she was incredible. She manages to be innocent, unhinged, seductive, psychotic, fragile, everything. And the amount of extreme close-ups on her face in the show is a bit unnerving, so it's amazing how well she was able to pull everything off when the camera is like up her nose basically for half the time. There are some fun cameos, such as Paris Jackson, aka Michael Jackson's daughter, and Billie Eilish. They both play very interesting roles, and they do them very well, especially Billie Eilish considering it's her acting debut, and the role she was given suits her very well. It's creepy and yet calm, very Billie Eilish. If she was to dip her toe into the acting world, this would be a very easy dip for her. I think she didn't have to stretch her acting chops much for this one, and that's good. You know, you don't perfectly fine, perfectly well casted. Paris Jackson's role was very interesting. I did not know it was Paris Jackson, only after researching a bit to figure out some stuff about the show did I understand that it was her, and she plays a stripper who's quarter black, and the whole scene was kind of funny, especially in hindsight when you realize it's Michael Jackson's daughter. But yeah, the show is structured in a way that makes the episodes not really connected, since there are some very large jumps between each one, which allows for the episodes to feel more contained within themselves. A bit like Kaleidoscope, if you watch that show. I do have a review of it. Check it out. So I do think you could probably watch the show in any order and it would still make sense, which isn't, you know, it's cool, but it does show that Kaleidoscope is not that unique. Oopsie. Anyway, whatever. Moving on. The music in the show is made especially for it, and it is made to sound a lot like Beyonce. So of course it works perfectly well with the whole material of the show. The editing is very unique. Like I mentioned, there are a lot of extreme close-ups, and it feels a lot like we're invading this girl's privacy. There are a lot of stylistic choices that make you question what is real and what is in Dre's mind, and I think that's very, again, purposeful, so it kind of messes with your head a little bit. I think that all of these things combined makes the show look very try-hard. It tries to be smarter than it actually is. It reminds me a lot of how when I tell people that I don't like the movie Memento, they tell me, oh, you just didn't understand it. Sure, that could be it, but it could also be that it's trying too hard to be edgy and complicated and ends up being annoying and condescending instead, you know? But I digress. Let me get into more of the spoiler territory and then I'll round things up with my conclusion. Skip to this point if you don't want spoilers. So a lot of my issues could be summed up with episode 6. I think it's probably the most controversial episode because it really throws everything for a loop. So you're either on board or you're getting off the boat. At first, as I was watching it, I thought it was a clever device to have the episode be a documentary within the show so that it looks like everything we've seen so far was some sort of reenactment or retelling of real events. They made sure to use different actors to portray Dre and company, but then they start talking about murders we haven't seen, or maybe I completely missed, but I'm pretty sure it's the former, and things just didn't add up, so it threw me off completely and I got very confused. Also, since it's one episode before the last, they kind of give us the ending before we see it. The episode wraps up the show before the show is actually over, which is an interesting choice to say the least. On top of that, because the creators decided to combine different events that actually happened, suddenly Dre takes a hard gender shift in the final episode. Throughout the show, she keeps inventing new names and personalities for herself, so it's not out of the realm of possibility, but all of those characters were women. So I have no issue with her being either, bi, queer, non-binary, trans, whatever. But because it's only for the last episode, it's a very hard shift. So it would have been more interesting, in my opinion, if she would have been shown to have done similar switches throughout the season. We would have seen her in a relationship with another girl first, or have her be less gender conforming in an earlier episode. The entire time she's very, very feminine, so that hard shift was a little jarring for me. Okay, let's wrap things up. Overall, I thought the show was good. It was a very easy binge and it tells a very interesting story. Having said that, I think the creators thought they were doing something insanely original, when in fact, they are not treading as much new ground as they want you to think they are. To me, it felt very much like they took, Beyonce stories, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and that Tom Felton documentary about fandoms, and mashed it all together. Ha! Edgy. But hey, if crazy fans that will go to extremes for their faves interest you, then I think you will like this. Have you watched Swarm? What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it? Is there an artist you are obsessed with? I would love to know. Thank you very much for watching. Please gently press that subscribe button if you would like to see more of this. Like or dislike, that's up to you. And I will see you all next time. Bye!